rankings now allow law schools to count the best scores, so you still should check with the law school, because some still may average, but most of them don't now. The reason they did before was because they had to, because the rankings required it. So it makes it a little easier for you to make the decision to go ahead and retake it, particularly if it's poor. But as Dr. Handberg mentioned, that if you've already got a good score, you may very well hurt yourself and not help yourself. But check with the individual law schools you want to go to and make sure the admissions director will tell you whether or not they average them. Most of them don't, though, because they're not penalized anymore like they used to be.
Well, the other thing was the state schools have come up with a different rubric. They used to automatically average, but they did that for reasons not wanting to appear discriminatory. So if your score was down, we average it, and then who can argue against average? This is the argument, which is an argument made by lawyers who don't do math, but a mathematician will argue with it. The other things here are what you, to some extent, control. And they're very important, because all of these are items to make you different from the other applicants. I know that you all think you're wonderful people, you know, unique individuals, but when you're in a law school admission committee, you're sitting there with 3,000 or 4,000 people, and you got files, and you can have 3.4 to LSAT score 153. We've got 11 people with that score and GPA. How do we tell them apart? This is where you go to your personal statement. Now, the personal statements have changed. It used to be a personal statement was something you wrote once and just made copies. Now, a lot of law schools have very specific directions, and you need to be aware of those. Florida, for example, asks them, have you been sending those Florida things I sent you to the majors?
Yeah.
Florida is very, very, very open about that. For the political science majors and the legal studies, I get stuff from Florida and I ship them out to the majors through Nick, and I send them to David, and I assume he's doing it. What it does, they talk about what they want in their personal statement. It's not called a personal statement. I think it's a diversity statement or something like that. So you got to be aware of what you're doing. You got to write for an audience, because the personal statement is where you can explain in a paragraph or less why you screwed up your grades. And now you've gone on. They don't want to know a long woe is me story. You know, everyone doesn't like me. I walk around the black cloud. You know, what they want to know is what have you learned from that, and how are you moving forward? If you can't say that, you're wasting their time, because the practice of law is full of adversity. You get a judge who's an idiot, so you're going to have to work around it. So the reality is, personal statements are very important. Make sure they're spell checked, grammar checked. When the computer says, ooh, this is a word that it doesn't recognize, don't just hit next. If you don't know if it's spelled properly or not, look it up. You know, because that's where people hurt themselves all the time. Because these letters, when they're read, are read by everyone in the committee. And that can be very devastating if one of them identifies mistakes.
Roger, I was just going to mention one thing that's really important is always tell the truth. You know, because you never know when something's going to come back to haunt you, but particularly if there is any kind of a background concerning the criminal record, even though it's minor. If you get caught lying, first of all, it'll get you in trouble with the Florida bar, but you probably get in more trouble for the lying part than the fact that you got caught with some marijuana when you were a teenager or something of that nature. So always tell the truth. If you're, for example, if you ran a marathon in 4.5 hours, you wouldn't want to say you ran it in less than 3. Just as an example, not that anyone's ever done that, but just in case.
Okay, now with the legal commercials over, we'll get back there. Letters of recommendation. A lot of law schools don't require them any longer, but they're good to have if you can get strong letters from faculty. Now, you can send usually up to 3. Why do I say faculty? Because, believe it or not, you're going to another school. And the faculty sitting on the committee, search committee, or the admission committee, are looking for evidence that you're going to be a good student. And that's why if you're doing honors in the major, that faculty member should be able to write about you in some detail. Whatever. You know, if you don't know any faculty, you better learn some. The reason is very simple. If you're just drifting through in the back of the room, never interacting, you're not getting anything out of college. Like a cafeteria, you come in, eat your stuff, and you leave. I know a lot of students do that. Oh, I gotta work. But interaction with faculty does not have to be going around and sucking up at their office hours. They don't want that, for one thing. But more importantly, you establish, if you've got good work, then, you know, faculty know that. Usually when I pass out grades, I know two groups. The idiots and the geniuses. The people in between that I don't know. They're not distinguishable, and they can become distinguished. Resume, this is not a resume of your school, like it's a resume of your career. A lot of you worked, have been out for a few years, or even though you may just come directly from high school to college, but you've been working the entire time. That's important because that shows ability to handle a diverse and complicated workload. And that's why you want to be able to talk about it. Other evidence of performance, you get an award, okay? We have an award here called Pegasus, which doesn't come, unfortunately, early enough to do any good for most applicants. Doesn't give it out until the spring. But if you said you got Pegasus, but you weren't graduating for another semester, when you apply to law school, you say, oh, I'm a Pegasus. They don't know what that means. You tell them. And you can provide something. Usually the award will say something, there's some description. Don't assume just because you did it that they know what it means. Being a student government officer here is much more important than it is at many schools. They have a real budget and make real decisions. A lot of student governments are basically high school student councils kicked up to the next level. All the president of the student body does is shake hands with, at meetings with the president of the university. Purely a thing. Dean's questionnaire, you will rarely see this unless you apply to a school in the Northeast. In the Northeast, there's an old tradition of a small liberal arts school. Maybe 2,000 students. The dean was the president of the university, actually the provost. He knew everybody. You know, you've seen Animal House. You know, they know the people. Because it's a small population. At UCF, the president doesn't know who I am. I suspect he doesn't know who most of the students are. He's nice enough to talk to, but he's not, with 60,000 students in the university, he's not going to know everybody I name. So a dean's questionnaire is should go over to the Office for Student Conduct. They ask about things if you've been disciplined, and they will ask what your ranking is, and they can provide that information. That's something you fill out, sign, send it over to them with an envelope to the law school. Other evidence of diverse background. Used to be the thing was, it was always race, gender, ethnicity, religion in some cases, would make you diverse. Well, officially that's not as true anymore. But you may, when I say diversity, it could be diversity in terms of your background and what your experiences are. I've had a couple of people who come back who want to go to law school who played professional sports. And they got to a certain level and it was clear they were not going any higher. So they did other things. And that's what law schools look for. If they look for a diverse student population, because they know they got plenty of grade grubbers who started out in kindergarten as death march all the way through school to get to law school. And, you know, they're not necessarily very interesting to them.
Roger, I just want to mention before we left the letters, I think your policy might be a little more liberal, but if it isn't, let me know. But I usually want at least either a 150 or a 3.0, one of those two, so I have something to write about. I also want to have someone take at least one class, and not every professor, so you want to go and check with someone and make sure what they want. And I think we both, I want to see your personal statement, your resume, your class audit, along with your LSAT score. If I don't have your LSAT score, if it's good, I want to emphasize it. If it's not so good, I need to be able to explain that, because the admissions committee might think, well, he probably wouldn't have written that letter if he knew the school. So I would want all those things, for the letter. I'm not sure what your position, but check with the professor that you're asking before you go and make sure that person seems to be willing to do the letter. If they're not, go somewhere else because you want a good letter.
Don't try to get someone to write a letter just because they're important, but they don't know you, they're not willing to do it. Letters are very critical because they're that extra. Some people write them better than others, but that's your extra push to make you different, more diverse than the other person. Yes, sir.
That's the person that you've taken, because I'm friends with the director of the speech department. She's only her first year, and she's willing to write me a letter. I've never taken a class with her. Does that matter?
It depends on what she's going to write about. If she has some way of assessing your academic potential, et cetera, yes, she can do that. That's up to the person. Because I teach a lot of web-based courses, have less personal contact with students, so I usually have them come to see me. They want a letter of reference. And then I tell them what I need from them, and then they can come back and break it. But usually if I have, even when I talk face-to-face, given my propensity not to remember names, I remember faces. I see students I had 30 years ago in the wall. I know who they are, but I don't necessarily know their name. So you got to make reestablish, especially if you think you're going to be out for a year, or you haven't seen a teacher in a semester or a couple semesters. If you're asking for a letter, go to the person during their office hours. Don't demand that they come in at 7 o'clock on Friday night because that's the only time you can work it into your busy social calendar. Don't worry about your letter, it will not be good. Yes, sir.
Would you recommend having a teacher in the political science department write you a letter, or would it matter if you have like a minor outside of the political science?
As long as it's somewhere there's an academic connection, could be what, yeah.
Just kind of touch off this question. For example, a family friend of mine back home is a lawyer, and I've done a few internships under her. Would I be able to use her as a reference, or does it have to be from an academic standpoint? 100%?
She would have to be able to write about you as an academic performer, and that could be done in an internship. There's nothing to say against it. The difficulty is just because she's a lawyer, don't assume she knows anything about writing letters to law school. The reason is because they went through law school doesn't make them experts on the other end, getting in. So you could come by. I think we have a thing you can get that you give to the person that says this is what they look for in a law school letter, etc. Yes.
In regards to the evidence of performance and awards and stuff like that, how far back should we go?
It's got to be college. You can't know high school. You're not in high school anymore. That's very serious.
I have a question about the recommendations. Do you suggest that it would be inappropriate to ask for a copy of the recommendation from the professor?
That is like death. Because understand this, when you go do a letter of reference, there's a form you print off from the LSAC site. What you have to do is fill in the top, and you have to sign it. If you don't sign it, that letter, when it's sent to the LSAC, will go on a file and stay there forever, because you're authorizing them to release the letter. You cannot demand to see a letter. If you do, I would tell you drop dead. I mean, there used to be, a lot of law schools used to have a system where, you write the letter, put it in an envelope, seal it up, sign your name on the flap, and give it to the student. He puts it in his packet, so we don't have to worry about putting the packets together. I did that. I wasn't real happy with it, but I had a kid who moved back to New Jersey. I get a letter from him the next fall. I didn't make it in; it was late doing it. But he then sends me back one of my letters. He had ripped it open, I read it, and he wanted me to now write him a letter. The only thing I asked him was, what school you're applying to? Because I was going to report him if he dared tell me. That's totally unethical. That's why they have the system. The letter goes directly to the LSAC, which then scans your letter with the authorization. And when the law school asks for your file, which is your transcripts and your LSAT score and whatever letters you've said are there, those will be sent.